Wait, I have something.
Right.
And as a mother, I forgot to take anything, so.
And are you ready? All right, I'm sorry, yes.
No, that's fine, we're acting.
I guess I meant in terms of notes. Okay,
I'm taking notes.
okay, all right, there we go. Looking in your direction.
Yes, and I might say, who seconded?
Right. All right, so welcome everyone. I'll go ahead and call to order the April 2025 meeting of the Davis Police Accountability Commission. Let's see, I'll go from this end and then we'll work our way over, and I imagine maybe one or two of our other colleagues will join us in a second, but Commissioner Bliss.
Here.
Commissioner Canning.
Here.
Commissioner Sherman.
Here.
Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald.
Present.
Vice Chair Wilson, and then myself, Dylan, I am here. Does anyone want to make a motion for approval of this evening's agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any further discussion?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, any abstentions? All right, agenda approved. Brief announcements from staff, and we are grateful this evening to have both Carrie and Barbara with us. I think as y'all all know, apparently an email that I missed receiving. But as we talked about in the last meeting, Kelly's, I think she is willing to take up this term of service as interim city manager, but I remember when I congratulated her, she said she was accepting the congratulations only because it was interim. And so I can imagine that when her duties there are over, she'll be glad to return back to her other duties here. Any announcements from Barbara, Carrie? All right. Announcements from commissioners. Commissioner King.
I just want to let folks know that tonight's my last meeting. So I'm going to be out of state for the next 2 months, well, 6 months actually. So, and I'm not going to go for reinstatement. So this is going to be my last meeting. I just want to let you know that it's been a pleasure to serve with fellow commissioners and staff. We've been very good for 4 years. It's been 4 years. I was just thinking about it today when we started, of course, we were all remote. Now it's been nice being live. So.
Yes, I second that we will certainly miss you, and we're glad to have your contributions over those 4 years, particularly I think strengthening this commission in the area of our knowledge of mental health services and the ways that intersects and impacts policing and police accountability. So yeah, very glad to have your service over the years. Wish you luck in your new endeavors to come.
More retirement.
Any other commissioner announcements? Yeah, hoping no one else is sleeping anytime soon. I was reminded by our astute Vice Chair Wilson that the month of April is National Arab American Heritage Month. We did acknowledge that, I think, last year on this commission. Also, it's National Child Abuse Prevention Month in the month of April. Of course, lots of intersections with policing, public safety, and our police accountability work. Just a couple of days ago, April the 2nd was World Autism Awareness Day. And I know that folks might remember that as much as the, police reform movement that sort of, ticked up a couple of years ago was about sort of a more equitable system of public safety for folks of color. It, was also trying to better serve folks who were, dealing with any type of mental health complications, but also folks in our community with disabilities who sometimes are perceived as not complying with, or maybe not hearing or understanding sometimes law enforcement orders, and then sometimes things can spiral out of control. And so making sure that people are aware of how autism works and affects folks in the community is important. That was just like I said a couple of days ago. Then lastly, the month of April is Alcohol Awareness Month, which of course draws attention to alcoholism and the ways that it can impact this community's public safety. A number of other things, it's National Pecan Day in a couple of months, or a couple of days, but I don't think we need to spend too much time talking about that. Any other commissioner announcements? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just also wanted to echo about Arab American month. It's just that we have so many Arab Americans in our community. And we're very appreciative of the contributions they have made, not only to our community, but to society over the years, to science, and all these different areas. We're just, I think, very fortunate to have such wonderful Arab Americans in our community, and that we are a community that welcomes them and cherishes them. Because unfortunately, right now, it's just all the strife going on, nationally against different groups. It's good that they can be here in Davis where they're appreciated and welcome. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I think the city council did a proclamation recognizing this observance last week.
Yeah.
Any other commissioner announcements? Council liaison. I think this is the first time that we've had, at least as a council member, Vice Mayor Neville here with us. So I welcome you in any announcements.
I have no announcements, but it's very nice to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to a general public comment, item 4. So this will be the time to address the commission on items not on our agenda this evening, or if you wanted to address us on an item that you imagine you won't be able to stay for, you can address us now. We'll say for everyone's, yes, some new folks in with us this evening, that we generally observe 3 minutes. And I don't know if Carrie or...
I just realized that the timer is not hooked up, so I will go ahead and.
Oh, yeah, that's what Kelly does anyway.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
usually uses the timer,
Yeah.
but let me.
And then while you're doing that, I forgot to acknowledge that we have our new Deputy Chief Peterson with us this evening. I almost didn't recognize him from the Davis Davis Enterprise headshot that we saw with the announcement, and I was sharing with both of them. I think when former Deputy Chief Henry was just being brought into the role, that it was like in his first couple of days in the role that he was with us in the Police Accountability Commission. So we're glad to have Deputy Chief Peterson with us, and in general in the force, but also with us this evening. And so if we're ready, Carrie, or maybe not.
I just said it's time.
I'm programmed for 2 minutes.
We do have some experienced public comment speakers. So,
I'm just making sure the owl is awake.
right, yes.
Come on down.
Oh, yes, I did hear
I'll just
that.
take up the airtime.
You're on.
Alan Hirsch, general public comment. First thing, correct the minutes. I was talking last time about the $24 million settlement the city paid for the tree death. And then commented that the tree commission would be, quote, degraded in the minutes. I did not say degraded. I said the tree commission is over. I appreciate staff would not rewrite my words. So it's the tree commission is over. Please correct the minutes to reflect back what I said. The HR was at the HRC meeting last week, and they presented a MAPA report, which is about what Arab Americans are feeling about Davis. And there's a lot of fear in the community for obvious reasons, for the deportation and the controversy around Gaza. I reflect that we need to be sensitive to that, especially the Arab American Heritage Month coming up, the deportation, and also mentioned the Human Relations Commission. My third item is a blacklist. There is an international blacklist of people accused of being anti-Semitic. And as was mentioned, I looked it up. There are 58 people in Davis on that list, international list. That list does not reflect the Jewish community. It's a very controversial list. Hillel's rejected it, but there are people I think who might be feeding it. There's conjecture about that, and there's concern that that list might actually be used for deportations and finding people to deport. So I used to be aware of that. It's called the Canary Island Mission List. It's international. It's quite controversial in the Jewish community. So please do not reflect the entire Jewish community based on what a few people are funding. Jewish Republicans, I think, is one of the funders of this thing. Also, October 8th played at the movie theater, and if you listen to it very closely, it's a conspiracy theory that there's an international network of Hamas supporters that are infiltrated our campus and supporting anti-Semitism, take down Western civilization. They explicitly say that in the movie. Be careful of that. We need to not go overboard. There is anti-Semitism, but there's an international conspiracy. I'm sorry. I know some prominent members of our community have been accused of being, quote, radical anti-Semites, unquote. That's unfair, and we need to watch out for that sort of slander. And that, again, does not reflect the mainstream Jewish community. Please do not associate everyone in the Jewish community with that. It's very important. The last thing, there's a Jewish American Heritage Month and a celebration that'll probably come on May 29th. That was also announced in the Relations Commission. And I'm a member of I'm on the Social Justice Committee chair of Beth Havery. Speaking for myself, but we will be represented as well as other groups in the community about the variety and the contributions of Jewish Americans to the community. So I think it'll be a picnic on May 29th, I believe. And there'll also be a seminar, I think, on anti-Semitism and other view that's in a group called Jews for Justice that we'll be bringing to the community, I think, somewhere along that time too. So thank you very much. Thank you for your hard work and keeping our community safe.
Thank you. I welcome the next public comment.
It's 5 minutes, not 3, according to the website. Yeah,
It's never-
according
it's
to
never
the,
been 5.
and it doesn't say 5 minutes.
Oh, I think that is 5 minutes for this agenda item.
For the entire comment section, it's
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Yes,
So,
yes,
so. if
That's just an
we're-
estimate.
If there were 10 people here, we would get
It's just an
30
estimate.
seconds?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Things that I am hoping this commission will address. With regards to the killing of Mario Matthews and the Davis Police Department's subsequent hiring of Drake Quintuaga, excuse me, I can't pronounce the name, who, as I understand it, was directly involved in the killing of Mario. I would like to know the Davis Police Department's hiring practices for police officers. I'd like it to be published somewhere. I would like to know how thorough the background checks are. I would like to know if the Davis Police Department has access to the internet. Does the hiring policies include Google? Had they Googled this person, they would have found out that he was involved in that killing. Does the Davis Police Department know that you can find a lot out about people by searching that person's name on the internet? Is there a record of the interviewing process that was used in hiring Drake Quintuaga? I would like to know where that record is, and is there public access for that record, for that interviewing process and hiring process? Yes, can they access that record? Do you guys know about this, the commission? And I would like to know, has anything changed with regard to the Davis Police Department's hiring practices of police officers? My next question, and things that I would like to know about, is does the Davis Police Department have jurisdiction over the campus police? How are they connected? My next question is DEI. What is happening with the trickle-down effect with the feds with regard to DEI practices and the Davis Police Department? How much is getting, how much are they getting rid of? Are they getting rid of anything? What language is changing in the police department in their hiring practices, as well as trainings? What trainings are being eliminated from the Davis Police Department as regard to DEI initiatives and funding? The other thing I would like is a written inventory of all of the military equipment that the Davis Police Department has and where I can access that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I don't lose track of what people were talking about.
Next agenda.
Yes, let's get into consent item or item 5, which regarded the minutes, and there was a comment with respect to the a correction to the minutes. Hopefully that was captured. See, I'm not sure who to look at, Carrie or Barbara.
We're both going, we'll make sure it's.
Okay, thank you so much. With that change in mind, Is someone willing to make a motion to approve the minutes from the March meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? I'm sorry?
Cecilia and Don.
Yes, yes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, minutes approved. Okay, so that takes us to our independent police auditor update. Mike, is Mike with us? Okay, there he is. Yes, okay. Mike and Stephen are with us. And so I do look forward to hearing generally with what y'all have to share with us this evening. But with respect to what was brought up in public comment, I think it might be helpful just to, at least in some of what you're going to talk about this evening, just outline the subject matter and results of your last audit, which I think might be informative with regard to some of those questions. And then we'll just take it from there. But welcome, Stephen and Mike, to be with us this evening.
Thank you, Chair Horton. Hello, everyone. Good to see you from afar. Mike Chinaco here with my partner, Steve Connolly. Yeah, we can talk about the last audit we did, and we can talk to you about the progress on our upcoming audit that we have just started to engage with the department on. And we can talk with you about the first case that is summarized and part of your packet. I'm going to turn all those assignments over to my partner, Steve, because he was primarily involved in that. And then I'll follow behind him. So Steve, take it on.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mike, and good evening, everybody. We're happy to have the opportunity to be with you remotely. I had the chance to be in Davis personally, in person, back on March 26th, so just about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and had the opportunity to meet with the chief and the new deputy chief and kick off our pending audit project that was requested by your board, and that had to do with the Davis Police Department's training protocols, practices with regard to new officers and the ongoing training that officers are required to have. And last but not least, the field training program, which is where brand new officers who are just joining the department for the first time, either out of the academy or from another agency, spend a very regimented period of time with a current existing Davis police officer who has been specially selected for the role. And they have the opportunity to work with that person to kind of become particularly accustomed to the city and the expectations of the Davis Police. With regard to the public comment and our previous audit, I would certainly encourage any interested person to review our public report on our audit relating to recruiting and hiring practices in the city of Davis. Many of the questions that were raised were answered in that audit, and just to speak generally, I'm not aware of any of the particulars that the commenter raised, but certainly the report talks in a general sense about the requirements from the state commissioning agency as far as what every agency has to do with regard to qualifications and backgrounds, et cetera, et cetera. And I hope that a review of that report would be a good step in the dialogue. And then last but not least, before I return it to Mike, we had a couple of completed complaint investigations that we reviewed and reported about and finalized and kind of communicated out to the department and to the city staff, and it is ready for prime time at long last, and Mike has another one. The case that I looked at, I just want to describe very briefly, and I hope everyone will get the opportunity to read our memo about the investigation. As you know, we have the opportunity to review all completed complaints into officer misconduct and evaluate the department's response. In this case, the allegation came from a third party. It was a father who was upset about his daughter's arrest for driving under the influence of alcohol. And while he acknowledged that the arrest was legally justified, the circumstances of it were troubling to him, and that was why he made the complaint. As the memo describes, the young woman was actually a passenger in a car at 1 or 2 in the morning, and she and her boyfriend, who was driving the car, were pulled over under suspicion of potential driving under the influence, and that was the male. He was field tested and evaluated and eventually taken into custody for driving under the influence of alcohol. And that left the young woman, who acknowledged to the officers that she herself had also been drinking, left her basically alone with the car, and the police took the boyfriend away. And the woman made the unfortunate decision of driving. It happened to be her vehicle that her boyfriend was driving at the time. She made the unfortunate decision to take the vehicle home herself. I think she didn't live very far away from the location of the stop. An officer who had been involved in the first call had parked around the corner and happened to see the car driving away with no headlights after, they made it pretty clear that it wouldn't be a good idea for her to do that. And they eventually pulled her over and took her into custody as well when she did not pass the different field sobriety tests. So as the father said, the arrest was justified, but the idea that it did not reach a better resolution, and that the potential vulnerability that the young woman felt kind of downtown by herself at that point in the evening could have contributed to that. And I think there was an undercurrent of wishing the department had found a more proactive, supportive resolution. The department did an investigation, evaluated the body-worn camera. I looked at the body-worn camera of the stop and the different officers that were involved. And this was a situation where the officers certainly didn't violate any policy or technically do anything wrong. It was just a question at the end of, we certainly agree with the department that there was no misconduct, certainly no formally sanctionable misconduct. But we would hope that the incident and the father's, I would think, very legitimate questions raised some discussion points in the department about, hey, is there anything we could have done differently or better here to facilitate this, to make it very clear to the young woman that she shouldn't be that she shouldn't be driving the car, wait with her while she called for a drive service or whatever the case may be. We didn't go so far as to make a formal recommendation because the circumstances of the case and her interactions with the officers were a little unusual, but it really was just kind of the larger principle. And I think, as we put in the memo, how does the city of Davis want and expect the police department to help to respond to situations like that? And is there some lessons learned and maybe some tweaking of protocol that could be done in the retrospect of what happened and the father's subsequent complaint about it? So again, the bottom line conclusions that no misconduct had occurred were something we were very much in agreement with, and the memo basically just encourages the department to revisit the whole thing with the idea of potential alternative solutions in the future. And certainly happy to answer any questions about that case or about the audit, but I'm also happy to turn it over to Mike to talk about a second completed case that was in your packet. So let me stop. I'm going to just stop there, Mike, and say if any commission members have a question, I'm happy to respond.
Questions for Stephen?
Yeah. Stephen, this is Robert Canning. When a stop is made like that, and field sobriety test is given to the driver, is there any obligation of the officers to check the sobriety of the passenger at all? Is there any, procedure or anything like that where they would check, make sure that they're safe to drive?
No, there actually is not, and unless that person was so intoxicated that the person couldn't necessarily be trusted to just kind of walk safely and take care of herself. Drunk in public at that level of intoxication is a separate offense. But if the person had just, the person was certainly able to communicate clearly with the officers, it was maybe a borderline case. And in that situation, the officers do not have an obligation. And in fact, as the memo says, if they had taken, it was her vehicle, if they had taken the keys away from her, towed the car and really prevented her, they actually didn't have any right to do that either. So it was really just an unfortunate combination.
Can officers offer a breathalyzer test to a passenger in a situation like this?
I'm sure they could. I can't, but it would be very unusual. And again, not an expectation or a requirement at all, because their expectation is that she certainly wasn't so intoxicated as to not be able to safely come up with an alternative solution. And their expectation was that she wouldn't be driving.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Stephen? I think I might try to get into this in a little bit of our discussion with the chief and the deputy chief, but I was having this discussion with my colleagues, Commissioner Sherman and Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald, when we were meeting a couple of last week. But there was an incident that was investigated by y'all, I think maybe a year or 2 years ago, where it was a situation, looking at just the plain text of what the rules were, what department policy was, what the law was. Yeah, the officer didn't break the law, but it was one of those cases. I wrote it down. What you said, Stephen. That there was a wish for a more supportive resolution. And I, in that case that was reviewed a couple of years ago, again, I could accept that no law or department policy had been broken, but I just wish it was wish something better would have happened there. I want to maybe, as we get into our discussion with our chief and deputy chief, we can maybe sort of figure out where there's sort of again, a more supportive resolution that might be available. And I know these cases, as you noted, Stephen, are very particular in their details and circumstance. So, recommending a policy change for a very specific thing is kind of difficult in this case. But yeah, I think there is, some cases where, again, department policy hasn't been broken, but I imagine, maybe I'm wrong, but I imagine we can do a little bit better in some of those cases. Any other questions for Stephen? Mike, anything else that you have for us?
I'll just summarize the second report that we prepared for you today. And in some way, it's a very different kind of case, but in some ways, it's a similar theme with regard to the issues facing the complainant in this case that I looked at. In this case, as indicated in the summarized report, this was a person who got a letter from the Yolo County District Attorney's Office indicating that she needed to come to Davis to be booked on a charge. The booking process is something that is, routine. She wasn't going to be held in custody behind it, but she needed to be booked in order for the proceedings against her to move forward. So in response to that letter, the woman called up Davis PD, talked to a lieutenant, said, I want to come down to accomplish this requirement that Yolo County is telling me I need to do. So can I make an appointment with you in order to accomplish that? And according to her, the lieutenant responded by saying, we don't do appointments. You just need to come on down to the police department and whoever's available will book you once you arrive. So she did that. Apparently she had no forms of private transportation. She didn't have a car, according to her. And so she took the bus to Davis from, I think she lived in maybe Vacaville or someplace like that. So she wasn't close. Arrived there and waited for an hour and a half or so. There was nobody available at the station to perform the booking process, according to the folks she talked to on the phone. And so she left. And then made a complaint. And I think the complaint was a little over the top. She claimed that her civil rights had been violated, that she had been falsely imprisoned. There's no evidence to her allegations. There's no evidence supporting her allegations. But as we indicated in the report, the way we would have characterized her complaint was more like a service complaint, in the same way that if somebody had called the Davis Police Department because there was a loud party next door and it took the Davis Police Department 2 hours to arrive, that wouldn't be a policy violation. It wouldn't be a violation of civil rights, but it might be something worth looking into to learn, why it was that the response was delayed, et cetera. And in the same vein, with hindsight, perhaps what we'd have liked to seen would have been to treat this complaint more like a service complaint. And that maybe in cases in which somebody doesn't have a way to get to Davis, doesn't live in Davis, and needs to go through this process in order to honor their obligations under the law, that there could be some more accommodations with regard to people like this. The complaint wasn't looked at through that lens, and our sense was that in retrospect, perhaps it should have been. There certainly wasn't a violation of policy, but then the question is there a way to facilitate somebody like the complainant who doesn't live in Davis and can't get to Davis very easily to accommodate her through so that she can be booked and entered into the system. So that's it. I think, with regard to both cases, I think the chief was very receptive to our points and our sort of different way of looking at things beyond the black letter law of the policy. And we appreciated that. So with that, I will end the discussion on our presentation unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Mike, and Stephen. Mike, one thing, your audio, I assume via your headset is kind of faint, and then there's a little bit of muffling, and so I don't know if it's possible to not use the headset.
It'll be worse, Dylan, if I don't, because.
Okay. Did you have something? Chief?
Yeah, if it's okay, to just add one thing. That last evaluation, we actually concurred, and I added a memo to that investigation outlining that we recognize some of those shortcomings and kind of outline how we're going to address those going forward. So I just wanted to add that to the record.
Thank you. Did you have something? Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask the chief, is the lobby open again?
No, it's not. And since I've been here, I think it's been closed since COVID. But this actual incident brought up a question about our potential of reopening it. So we're looking into that. We are missing 2 of our 3 records clerks that work the front counter. So part of it is being able to manage the workflow in there. But as we had kind of indicated in that memo in relation to this complaint, that's something we're exploring to reopen it.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
I don't have a specific question about this case, Mike, but I have a question about the log that you have and how this case or the other case fits in. Are the 2 cases you reviewed today listed on this log?
Yes.
And if so, which ones are they? I find this very difficult to follow because we know the date you received it, but we don't know the date that the department's investigation is completed, your review is completed, and the date it comes to us. So we're sort of left with this way back in 24, and the title may not be quite the same. I was trying to match this up with what was on the log, so I had a sense of where we are on this, and I wasn't able to do that very well.
So I am happy to respond to that question. I just pulled up the log myself just to double check. I absolutely appreciate your point with regard to the timing and some uncertainty about who's doing what to whom and when it's all syncing up. The 2 cases that we covered tonight are the first case listed from February of 2024 and then the third case listed from October of 2024. And my understanding is that we'll be able to present 2 additional completed cases at next month's meeting. So in terms, I think your point is a really good one about when was the complaint received by the department? When did the department finish? When did we get it? When was our review completed, et cetera? And we can absolutely, I'll say 2 things with regard to that. One is we can enhance this log to provide more detailed information with regard to those kinds of questions. So thank you for raising that point. And secondly, we have a new protocol with the new chief that I think is going to reduce some of the lag time of these events. The new chief is committed to providing us with more real-time notification as complaints come in and as they are finalized, whereas his predecessor, Chief Pytel, was really more kind of a bundle them all together at the end of the year sort of an approach. So I think our turnaround will be faster going forward, but we can certainly enhance the log as well to give you some more detailed information.
Yeah, I just think it would really help us to know how sort of the process moves all the way through the system, because it's not any particular spot that may or may not be a hang up. But it's real hard to tell by just seeing this one date on there. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Other questions for Mike and Stephen? So it just, you know, from my vantage point, Mike, as I was listening to you detail that last report, it makes me wonder if there might be a benefit to sort of stratifying maybe developing different types of complaints, wherein you might be reviewing different types of information. If you know, you kept sort of referring to this, oh, this might be more appropriately a call for or a complaint of service. And I think that there might be, you know, depending on what type of resolution you're seeking, depending again on what type of information might be available because of the circumstances, it might be helpful to sort of say, well, this is you can give, you know, it all goes to you, but, you know, you can have a service complaint and it can be sort of looked at in that way. And perhaps, because sometimes, and I don't think it has anything to do with Mike or Stephen about the quality of your work, but I sometimes hear from people who, you know, gone through the complaint process, oh, well, you know, I gave them all my information, they didn't do anything. I think sometimes that comes from a misalignment of what the expectation is from the, you know, person filing the complaint and, you know, sort of what's possible given the sort of general grab bag nature of, you know, the complaints that are brought to you. But does that make any sense? Does that seem like that would be something that would be helpful in better triaging and navigating our complaints?
You know, I think that, you know, any complaint that comes in the door, Davis PD has been very good at addressing. And I think, you know, the way they're characterized, it for me doesn't matter whether it's a service complaint or whether it's a personnel complaint or it's a complaint about abuse. But depending on how you look at the allegations, it may determine how you address the issues. In this case, it was a little more complicated, and to Davis's credit, or the police department's credit, the complainant, when she was contacted after she made the complaint, wished to withdraw her complaint. So at that point, many other agencies would have just dropped the whole thing right there. Davis didn't do that. They pursued it, but in our view, you know, as our memo indicates, they didn't look at it from the perspective of, this was really a situation where the woman is complaining that I show up at the lobby to do my duty, and then there's no one here to help me do my duty. That's essentially her complaint. But she didn't characterize it that way, and therefore it wasn't handled that way.
Thank you, Vice Chair Wilson.
Actually, he brings up a good point, and I think, as I understand what Dylan is saying, is he's looking for categories, because the advantage of having categories, of course, is to determine whether or not the complaints fit more into one than another. So do you look at complaints in that way, looking to see if there's more in personnel or service or whatever?
Well, a service complaint is actually it's a term of art, really. And this case, we focused on what had elements of what was ultimately a service complaint, with the idea being, hey, department, this person's complaint, which was basically that her civil rights was violated, she was falsely imprisoned. There were a lot of genuine personnel complaint elements to what she was frustrated about. And clearly no policies were violated, no individual officers mistreated this woman in any way. But the question then rolls into, are we done here, or is there more that could happen? And I think the whole idea of looking at these things holistically and seeing if there are, even though in terms of individual officer accountability, there isn't anything to do here, we certainly can review our systems and our processes and maybe make some adjustments and turn this into an opportunity. What the chair is talking about is something a little different, and it was interesting to me. It certainly resonated with me when he talked about hearing from complainants who are frustrated because they feel like nothing happened. And that's where we hope our reports are going to shed some light on the process. So much of it happens in ways that the complainant or other members of the public don't have access to. But ideally, the department really is engaging with the issues, reviewing body camera, trying to figure out exactly what happened, and not just, dropping the thing behind a filing cabinet for 6 months. So we're really talking about a few different things, but certainly I'm a big fan of more information and more transparency as to what happens with the very few complaints that the department ends up getting in the course of a year.
Thank you. Other questions?
I guess, I could sort of see the benefit of both versions, because what comes to us here is a case, and we discuss a case, and do we have questions about it? But at the end of a year or 2 years, should there not be perhaps a report to the public that says there were XYZ cases, this fell into how many were personnel issues, how many were policy issues or service? I don't know if there can be, but instead of just having individual cases we're looking at, get something a little more of an aggregate. I mean, we've been a commission now since 2019, and I don't know that we've ever seen anything in an aggregate and discussion about what types of complaints are coming before this commission. And my guess is the public might be interested in that, because I think our department does a very good job in responding to complaints, and I'm not sure the public knows that.
Commissioner Bliss, that was our initial strategy, was to do an annual report, but the commission voted that they didn't want to wait till the end of the year to have an aggregate report, and they wanted these to be coming as we completed the review on an ongoing basis. So if the commission wanted to go in a different direction and do an annual aggregate report, we'd be happy to do that as well. That was a commission decision that.
I like them coming in, Mike. I like them coming in individually. I'm just saying that I believe that after a certain period of time, and that's to our detriment that we haven't come back perhaps to ask that. Not, you are doing what we asked.
Okay.
But I'm just thinking in retrospect now, after this amount of time, as we're bringing up topics, do we have enough that there could be something? That's my question I'm just throwing out there.
Commissioner King?
Yeah, I'll second Mary's suggestion, but I think it would be worthwhile to do both, actually. Because I'm sure Chief Henry would like to know how many complaints and of what kind of complaints have been submitted over the last year. It might offer some insight into trends in the department. I mean, this kind of data to me is always very important. And you can have it on a front-facing dashboard.
Chief Henry?
No, I think it's an excellent point, and we do. It is on a front-facing dashboard, and it's on our website, and it gives a breakdown of every complaint received by the department over the year and what category it falls into, and use of force as well. We have 2 separate reports, which are required annual reporting to the state anyway. But those are on our website, so if somebody wants to take a look and find out, hey, how are things trending, and what quote-unquote category are these complaints falling into, we do provide that annually.
Do you know just like, not to put you on the spot, but what some of those categories might be?
Sure, there's failure to obey policy or law. There's rude conduct, there's dishonesty, and obviously there could be, you know, an excessive force complaint, a whole variety of things that something could fall into, but they generally fall into three main categories. Obviously, if somebody uses excessive force, that's illegal. It's against the law. It's a violation of law and it's a violation of policy.
Thank you.
Chief, is this dashboard, is all the complaints you receive, not just the ones that come through the independent auditor? Is that correct?
Well, so if anybody files a complaint with the Davis Police Department, regardless of content, we review it and the police auditor reviews it. And then those are added to this, and essentially it's a look back for the entire year. And so we usually publish that sometime around January. And what we do is we do a look back of all the complaints received, and then we categorize them. And then obviously, as everybody knows, the police auditor's reports are also public facing. So if somebody wants to go back and take a look at those individual reports and their analysis, they can do it as well.
Other questions, comments?
This is minor, it might be somewhere else on the police webpage. Excuse me. There's a, you know, serve with pride, enforce the law, picture of the department, and then a gentleman's picture about build a career, serve the community. Then there's a lot of white space there. I'm wondering, you know, it might be a priority, it might not, but, you know, just please note that our hours for the public are such and such, or something to let the public know that the, what's called the lobby is not open or only by appointment, something like that. That, you know, just a suggestion. It's not really important, but, you know, it might prevent something like that from happening in the future. Thank you. I was surprised too. I went down there and I forgot that, that it wasn't open. I was like, whoa, it was funny. The kids were like, wait a minute, that's the police department. Aren't you supposed to? Because there's stuff that happened after COVID, so I totally forgot, but it might be helpful, to people. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sherman?
Yes, thank you. I think what I'm hearing suggests that we have a process here that is not fully mature or set as yet. It's a work in progress. I get that feeling from everyone who's been talking about this. One of the issues that we've been trying to deal with over the last few years in our role as a police accountability commission. I'm sorry. One of the issues that we've had to cope with is the timing of the complaints and the length of time it takes. And I'm not suggesting that we're dragging our feet or that anybody in the process isn't doing their best to move it along. But it just seems to be a process that takes quite a bit of time. And on one hand, I think we're fortunate in Davis and with the police department that we have and with the oversight that we have, that we don't have a lot of complaints. So we don't really have a big amount of data to work with. So that's good, but it's also a problem because it takes longer to analyze and then to formulate a picture of a pattern, perhaps we could say, of what's going on in the interface between the public and the police department in a variety of circumstances. And I think in this circumstance, a particular case like this one, we have so few, really, and that, as I say, that's a good thing, but it also makes it a little more difficult to process and to come to conclusions. So this particular case is dramatic, and it's easy to it's easy to exaggerate its impact on the total picture. And I don't want to imply in any way that each case is not very important, for the people that are involved in it, for the cops themselves, for the management of the police department, for us, and everybody in our government. The whole process is complicated, and we don't have a lot of data. We have just these few cases. So one of my impulses is to suggest patience and not get overly involved in any one or two cases, unless there was something egregious and dramatic. Hopefully there won't be. But what I feel I'm hearing is that each of these cases, if this is an example, is a study in and of itself, and an example for everybody involved. And of course, we have to, as good managers, we have to take into account the feelings and the needs of all parties who are involved in these very sensitive and difficult. It's difficult for us to come in 2 years after an event with little pieces of information, and not the report that we got from Mike and Steve, especially going into all the details, quite complete. But as we've talked about it tonight, we see that there are a lot of issues, it's kind of like a core in the center of the actual event, and then circulating all around it are all these implications of what are we learning from this that will apply to other situations, and it is complicated. So I think my concluding suggestion would be on this particular case that we've heard about as much about it as there is to know, and that we're going in the right direction, and it's a learning process. And it's clear to me as a commissioner that it is the attitude of our police department and our management of the police department that these are learning experiences, and we don't just shake them off and hope they go away. Actually, they are opportunities. Not that we welcome, but there will always be situations, and each one is an opportunity for us to develop and refine policies, all the while with all the daily routine stuff that occupies.
Hello?
If someone's picking up on the mic, your volume, so. It was echoing back.
Oh,
Coming off
okay.
the phone was echoing back.
Oh, yeah, it seemed like a little technology kerfuffle.
There's a technology issue. We're having some volume from a phone in the back of the room.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if people realize when they're talking in the audience too, the owl projects it back to
Yes.
us.
Our good friend, the owl. The last thing I'll say on this, and then I think we should maybe move to public comment, is just to connect back to something that Stephen said a second ago, is that, to the extent that the reports after the incidents can explain, hey, if, we felt like there wasn't a violation of policy or law, to really as much kind of over explain that, to make sure that people sort of understand. Again, I feel like sometimes the dissatisfaction from folks who file complaints after it's been taken a look into is just, again, from like a misalignment with what their expectations was at the beginning and then kind of what happened at the end. So I think in conjunction with all the things that we've been talking about this evening, in terms of aggregate sort of numbers and things like that, I think it's going to be helpful to continue doing what I know y'all are already concentrating on, and just to make sure there's as much of an explanation as possible as to how y'all came to really whatever determination it was after an incident was looked into. I think that can, I think it's, some others have mentioned this evening, help folks better understand, how we got there, and then perhaps better understand what the process is going forward in the future. Is there, I'll open up for public comment on this agenda item. Is there anyone who wants to address us on any of these topics? Or this topic, I should say. Okay, then I'll take it back to the commission. Any final questions or comments for Stephen and Mike? I'll thank y'all once again for keeping us informed and making sure that we're able to do our job. Okay, then we'll go ahead and move to item 7A, which is Davis Police Department internal affairs processes. Of course, it's listed here as having the chief and Lieutenant Beckwith. But we have the chief and our deputy chief with us this evening, and so we welcome both of them to share with us. I expect we're going to get into a wide-ranging conversation, but particularly in terms of their presentation, what happens within the department relative to internal affairs, which I think there was possibly some questions about a little bit earlier in the evening.
Apologies, we're just getting ourselves organized here.
No worries.
Okay, good evening, commissioners. Thanks for having us here tonight. Tonight was supposed to be Lieutenant Dan Beckwith, who is the lieutenant of our professional standards division, but he's got the flu. So I told him, do not show up. You're welcome.
Yes.
So tonight we're going to kind of go over the internal affairs review process or the citizen complaint process, or often referred to as professional standards. But essentially it's what happens when somebody calls and says, we're unhappy with the service we got, or we believe the officers did some kind of misconduct. So the professional standards division, which I already indicated, is head up by Lieutenant Dan Beckwith. It's part of the Office of the Chief, and he's responsible for tracking and investigating all complaints that come into Davis PD. Obviously, there's other entities that are involved in the process, but he's the primary investigator, which is possible to do because we don't get a lot of complaints, so he's able to manage that. But we'll kind of get into sometimes, depending on the category of complaint, it may get handed down. So there's 19 slides, that's a lot. So I'm going to try and go through these pretty quickly, but if something comes up and you want me to slow down or stop, please just let me know. So legal requirement, Penal Code 832.5 is a statutory requirement for all police departments and sheriff's departments to have some process to be able to perceive and investigate complaints from the community. So it's a requirement by law. And then the departments have to post that. So it has to be available to the public as to what's the process, how do they go about doing it, what forms are required, if forms are required, which are not required for us, but we do have a form for that. Types of complaints, they can really vary. They can be, an allegation of discrimination, excessive force, discourteous conduct, failure to follow policies, failure to follow law, or it may just be service related, as we were just describing. It could be related to a policy that we have that people may not like, or it could be related to a procedure that we have that people do not like. And I would say the good majority of ours are in that second category. We put them into two types of categories. So a complaint that comes in that's considered a category 1, and this is the initial review. These are definitely much more severe complaints. This would be the complaint related to illegal conduct, excessive use of force, something along those lines where real discipline is going to potentially be issued if the complaints are found to be true and the complaint is sustained. A category 2 complaint is again more of that service or policy issue, and those are less likely to result in serious discipline. They're most likely going to be result in either minor discipline, counseling, or corrective action. So complaint intake, we have a policy which is posted on the web, and it talks about our process for receiving complaints. It's very robust. We have in policy that if somebody calls and says, hey, I'm unhappy and I want to talk to a supervisor, that becomes a priority. They will be connected with the watch commander or potentially a division supervisor or even a manager, depending on what the complaint nature is. They can email a complaint and through general email, through an officer email. All those will be funneled back to the office of the chief and then assigned to Lieutenant Beckwith. They can call any Davis PD phone number and say, hey, I have a complaint, I want to file a complaint, and that will be directed to a manager. They can obviously submit a complaint to the PAC, they can submit a complaint to the police auditor, they can submit a complaint through the Federal Department of Justice, they can also submit a complaint through the California DOJ, they can also submit a complaint to City Hall, and they can also submit a complaint to California Post. So really, any way that somebody wants to submit a complaint, and I've actually seen complaints just come on a piece of paper, and so you wrote down what the nature of the complaint is, and we will absolutely receive it. So the investigative procedure, as the complaint comes in, we quickly try to identify what is being alleged, what are the accusations of misconduct, and then we figure out what category it has to go into. That is also kind of critical because there's some other components what I'll get into related to SB2. That's the decertification process through POST. POST is the Police Officer Standards and Training Commission. They run a separate investigation outside of our current internal investigation and the auditor's analysis for certain categories, which we'll get into in a little bit. The complainant, obviously the investigator, most likely Lieutenant Beckwith, will identify and interview complainants, witnesses, involved personnel. They'll gather reports, they'll gather a body-worn camera, in-car camera, audio, surveillance, depending on where the incident may have taken place. They'll also, if the complainant has video, they can obviously share that with us as well. And then the investigator will complete their investigation, and it's just a fact-finding mission. And what they'll say is, hey, here was the allegations made, and here's the investigation, and here's what we determined. That is then sent to the office of the chief, and either goes to the deputy chief, Deputy Chief Peterson here, or it goes to Deputy Director Gene Lyon if it's part of our professional staff. So whether that's a dispatcher, a public safety specialist, a community service officer, parking enforcement, those complaints would go to them. Those two individuals then do a review and analysis of the investigation, and then they sometimes may ask for further investigation from the investigator if there's a question that seems unanswered. And what they will do is they will develop findings. So they will determine, hey, based on the information, how am I going to disposition this case? And they will also impose discipline or corrective action if necessary. So obviously the key elements of an IA investigation is impartiality, ensuring that the investigator is unbiased and as objective as possible, protecting the identity of complainants and witnesses when we can. That's not always possible. Obviously providing the accused officer with an opportunity to respond to allegations, which is required by law and obviously best practice. And then completing the investigation as promptly as we can to maintain public trust. Who does what? Again, as we stated earlier, professional standards lieutenant is responsible primarily for it. Sorry, go ahead.
Quick question. Could you just quickly talk about any timeframes for so when you receive a complaint to when it's initially reviewed to first actions, and how long does it take to get to the chief?
Yeah, it really kind of depends on the participation of the complainant. Often very times people will lose interest, and so trying to get the information necessary to complete the investigation can be tough. It depends on the complexity of the case, how many witnesses, types of evidence. We shoot for a 60 to 75 day window for the investigator to have their primary review of the case and completion of the report, but that can get extended. And obviously, a lot of times what we're doing is waiting for specific evidence related to the investigation, witness statements. We want to try and make sure that investigation is complete to the best of our ability so that we don't have to go back if information comes to light after the investigation is complete. So that's our general time frame. but obviously it can just depend on the complexity of the case. Other lieutenants may conduct lower level complaints, and that's kind of the category 2 complaints that we discussed. And that's just based on workload. Currently, right now, Lieutenant Dan Beckwith is also the overseer of training department-wide. And we have usually a training coordinator that's assigned to him. It's been vacant due to difficulty in recruitment, so he's been doing both jobs. So some of these investigations have taken longer than anticipated, and so we have occasionally will farm out an investigation to another lieutenant depending on the category. The deputy chief and the deputy director do the reviews of the investigation for completeness and accuracy, and then they do findings and analysis and recommendations. Disciplinary action, if a case is sustained and disciplinary action is recommended, there's a variety of types. That can obviously be corrective action, that somebody just misunderstood a policy or did something that just requires some kind of formal intervention in correcting the behavior. That can also include retraining if necessary. It can also go all the way up to suspension, demotion, or even termination if necessary. So this kind of speaks to the categories, and these are required by law. And this is how we finalize a case with its disposition. There's unfounded, which would be an investigation where it clearly did not occur. And there's evidence that to the contrary, usually body-worn camera, that indicates the allegation was false. There's not sustained, which is essentially there's no real evidence to prove one way or the other. There's sustained, where it's very clear misconduct did occur and we can identify the officer involved in it. There's exonerated, where the act occurred, but it was actually illegal. And then there's frivolous, which essentially is without merit. And that could be somebody just filing a false complaint and it's very clearly false, or it's for harassing purposes. Alternative conflict resolution, as you're aware, is also another way to resolve a case, and we have a process for that. And then, as Steve and Mike indicated, there's withdrawal, and that is that somebody files a complaint and they decide that, hey, I'm going to withdraw the complaint. I'm no longer interested in pursuing this process. There's 2 ways to approach that. There are times where, depending on the severity of the complaint, we may just withdraw it. There's also times where we're concerned about the allegation itself, and just because the complainant is not interested in pursuing the complaint, we will actually continue the investigation anyway to ensure that there was no misconduct. Resignation prior to discipline, and this kind of feeds into SB2, or the certification process for police officers. It used to be there was a process in some agencies where somebody would have a pending investigation of misconduct. And they knew that they were in the wrong and they were probably going to get terminated. So what they would do is they would resign and it would be held in lieu. And that was problematic because those cases were sealed and other agencies may not be aware of it. So people could essentially go to another agency and get hired, and that agency may not be aware that this case was out there lingering. So that's changed now. Even if somebody does terminate or does resign, we're still going to complete the investigation and still come up with finding one. And then post-certification SB2, which is a pretty substantial shift for law enforcement. Post, as you know, basically is the agency at the state level that's responsible for training standards and the certification process. So a police officer cannot be a police officer in the state of California without a certification. They obviously do a lot of things other than misconduct, but right now that's probably the biggest thing that they do based on the number of complaints that are forwarded to them. And so if an officer is alleged, if misconduct was alleged, we do an investigation. If it meets the criteria, it goes to post. They do their own investigation. So an agency theoretically could say, hey, we find no fault with the officer, but post could say, we do find fault and we don't, agree with the findings of the agency, or we don't feel their investigation was thorough enough. We're going to conduct our own investigation. And we're gonna actually move to decertify the officer, which would obviously make them ineligible to be a police officer. So it's another layer of review. So when there is an allegation that falls into the serious 9 of misconduct from post, we have 10 days to report that allegation to post. Obviously, that can termination or separation from employment. If somebody leaves our agency, we have to report to post why they left, and we have to sign an affidavit saying this wasn't related to discipline. Or if it was, we have to say it was related to discipline. Obviously, the goal there is to make sure that bad actors are out of the system and that we are sharing that information transparently and openly with other agencies so they don't hire somebody that may not be a good fit as a police officer. This is the list of serious misconduct that would require reporting to post: dishonesty, abuse of power, physical abuse, sexual assault, demonstrated bias, acts that violate the law, participation in a law enforcement game, failure to cooperate with an internal investigation, or failure to intercede. So any complaint that involves any of these, we have 10 days to report it to post. And again, post, will usually wait for the agency to complete their investigation. They will then send it to an investigator who reviews that investigation for thoroughness. They'll do their own analysis. If they disagree with it, they will send it to a board who does an initial review and makes a vote whether or not to move it on to the actual commission. The commission then has a public hearing and they make a determination whether or not they want to decertify the officer. Once the certification is revoked, that person can no longer be a police officer in the state of California. I think I covered most of this: discovery, misconduct, investigation by post, review, decision, and then the decertification process. And then this is release of records, SB 1421. I believe this came out maybe 2016, 2017. Essentially, this is the requirement for what's called a critical incident. The agencies have to release all records related to it. That's an officer-involved shooting, use of force that results in death or great bodily injury, sustained findings of sexual assault related to their position, sustained findings of dishonesty, sustained findings of unlawful arrest or unlawful search. So if any of these occur, we are also required to release those upon receiving a public records request. This is it in a nutshell. I don't know how well you can see that as I look at it on the board now. I think it looks a little small. I probably should have zoomed this in a little more. But if you look at step 1, complaint is received. Complaint initial review. What type of complaint are we dealing with? Obviously, if it's applicable, we're going to immediately report it to post. It's then signed to an investigator. The investigation occurred. There's a review of the investigation by the deputy chief or the deputy director. They come up with findings and their own analysis, and then they apply discipline if necessary. Release of the records, if it is 1421 applicable. The case is then sent to the police auditor, and obviously those can kind of coincide with each other, or they might actually be, the case may be sent to the auditor earlier. Submit the completed investigation for post. This is now post follow-up on the initial complaint that we forward to them. Analysis and findings from the police auditor, findings from post, and then it is posted to the website. So as you can see, there's essentially on a complaint that comes in, there's potentially, depending on the severity of it, 3 separate entities that are all going to review this investigation independently, and this is all a transparent process. And then what we do is at the end of it, the police auditor's reports are posted on our website so people can review them for themselves. And then I'm happy to take any questions. I hope that wasn't too fast.
Thank you so much, Chief. Questions? Okay, so I have 2 different things. So first, let's get into I don't remember which, I should have wrote down which slide it was, but it doesn't really matter. It was one of the early ones with regard to describing the deputy director and deputy chief's role in the, there it is, right there, okay. So, and I should be clear, I think folks know this about me already, you know, there's no personal concern with regard to the deputy chief or deputy director here, but I'm just a little concerned about the possibility that this deputy chief and deputy director review could be a place where bias could kind of enter the equation. That's kind of my concern here. Really, again, with no personal direct concern with the people involved in particular. And so I'm just wondering, you know, it's a small department. It's not like it's LAPD where there's, you know, you might not know who the person is who's, you know, the subject of the investigation. I'm from LA, and so, you know, but so what guards against that, the possibility of bias entering the equation?
Sure, and I think we all know there's always going to be bias. None of us can exclude bias from any of our decision making, and so we are very aware of that. The process is obviously designed to make sure that all the evidence is included in the investigation so that the deputy director or the deputy chief can make an honest assessment of it. We also have this police auditor who's now going to get this entire report and make their own findings. And it is very possible that the police auditor could look at the findings and say, we disagree. We find that there might be bias involved in how the findings were developed. That's always a real possibility. That's the good thing about Davis, is that we have an independent auditor who is able to review our process and look at all the documentation and the evidence related to it and draw their own independent conclusion. Additionally, if the case is SB2 qualifier, there's a third entity that's also going to do that process. And obviously they have very limited bias because they don't know anybody in our department. So those are kind of the guardrails that we have, knowing that, yes, of course, there's always going to be some level of bias. And so having redundancy in the review process is critical.
The description here says that review would be to, you know, check for completeness and accuracy. With regard to that second word, accuracy, you know, if say, you know, the lieutenant doesn't have the flu, you know, and is engaging in an investigation for one of these complaints, and, you know, I'm just to make up a detail, you know, determines that, I don't know, the officer attempted to activate the body camera, and it, you know, it just didn't turn on, you know, for some technological reason. And the chief or deputy chief, I guess in that, or chief, deputy director or deputy chief, I guess in this case, if it was a sworn officer, would be the deputy chief, is reviewing this and maybe comes to a different conclusion as to how all of that played out. Does that sort of overrule what the lieutenant determined in his initial investigation?
Yes, absolutely. And if the lieutenant is doing his job well, he should not be drawing any conclusions. That's not his role. His role is to say, hey, here's the facts as we know them. You know, if the deputy chief is doing his job well, they're reviewing it, they're doing their due diligence, and if there is a conclusion drawn by the lieutenant, oftentimes they will tell them this needs to be corrected, or they'll note it in their own analysis.
Thank you. The second question I had was, you know, there was a public comment that brought up the situation with Mario Matthews' death at Golden One Center, and the officer that was hired related to that situation. And I guess I want to maybe come at it from a different angle. You know, say, you know, some really unfortunate, you know, incident occurs with one of our officers. And if I recall correctly, in that particular situation, the officer in question wasn't determined to have, like, there was a settlement with the city overall, right? But wasn't determined to have directly violated the policy of the security agency that he was currently employed in. And so, you know, had he been an officer, it might have been a different circumstance in terms of the police department policy, but had he been an officer, it seems like that would have been a situation where an investigation was, you know, conducted. Perhaps, you know, drawing back to the conversation that we were having with the auditors, there may have been a thought, well, hey, a more supportive solution could have been developed here, but no law was broken or department policy, was broken. So I'm wondering if in a case like this where, we find nothing has been letter of the law broken, but it still is a serious sort of incident. I'm wondering, I can kind of guess, get some of these answers, but what would be the way that a possible next department could find out about that and sort of get that information? I know that, at least part of it is that the auditors, investigations are, at least have a public facing report, but what else sort of allows a new department, another agency, as I think we've talked about in this commission before, this has been a big problem at different times in the recent past where people have just sort of, either because of resigning before it was completed or whatever else, just sort of, for lack of a better term, got away scot-free. But yeah, so what sort of, in the case that there isn't a direct violation of department policy, what sort of allows another department in the future to consider that themselves?
Yeah, for sure. With a security guard, it would be almost impossible. And as you said, there was an investigation. The district attorney's office did their own investigation and found no culpability. That being said, I think, the SB2 has changed the dynamic. Part of a background investigation is we get waivers if it's a lateral. So they're already a police officer somewhere and they're trying to become a police officer here. We go back and we do a file check with that agency, which tells everything that officer's essentially been involved in. Additionally, we have to PRA request post to get their post profile, and that will also indicate whether this officer there's been an allegation of serious misconduct and what the department's findings were related to that serious misconduct. So it's very possible that, we could get a person who's interested in lateraling from another department to Davis, and we ask for the post profile. We will get the post profile. We look at it and go, oh, there's 2 allegations of excessive force, both whatever the disposition was. That's going to be a cue for us when we go to do the file check to make sure that we're looking at those cases to find out what occurred. Because obviously a multitude of things could occur. The upside of having the post profile, though, is you're going to get a very good snapshot. Is this individual getting a lot? Is there a pattern here? Is there a pattern of conduct where allegations are being made against this officer? And so that is a very positive, because agencies have varied in the past as to the degree of records that they kept and how long they kept them. I mean, there are some very specific guidelines in the law that any complaint, must be maintained for 5 years. But it depends on when this person's lateraling and whether that's fallen off or not. So that's our current process for ensuring that, if somebody fell into this category where, hey, there's been allegations of misconduct in the past, that we will be able to check.
Thank you. Other questions for the chief and deputy chief? All right, I'll go go ahead.
Actually, yeah. Thanks. A couple things you mentioned in here. In the policy that we got as part of the packet, retaliation. Is that you conform to a whistleblower policy of some sort? Is that a city policy or the police department policy?
Both.
Both. Okay. And then I had one other. Oh yeah. When officers are interviewed, are they able to? Says a member may bring a representative with them to schedule counsel. Could that be, say, the bargaining unit's attorney?
Could be, yeah. It's their choice.
Okay. Thank you.
Other question? All right, we'll open up to public comment and see if there's any. Welcome.
Okay, we're on a good night. That's great. Very pertinent stuff. Post is part of the Davis Police Department. Post is where? Where are these people?
Sorry,
Where is this lieutenant?
Maybe if I could you'll have to sort of get out all of your questions and then.
Okay, that's my question. Wait, I have one more. And then, so is Post state agency? How are they connected? The lieutenant, is that person employed by the Davis Police Department? And then my other question is, That professional standards lieutenant has training to do that specific job. Is there any way that we can get a copy of that training? And then, this is what you had mentioned, the auditor, but I don't think it was in there. Is the auditor paid by the city or by the Davis Police Department?
All right, as a former poli-sci student, I can definitely appreciate these org chart questions. Do you want to take those, Chief? If you don't, it's fine.
No, sure. Post is part of the state. It's an independent department within the state. The police auditor, so the police department is part of the city, and we all operate what's off general fund, which means that there's no separate funding source for the police department in the city. So money that is given to a vendor or a contractor comes from the same source. Our lieutenants, including all of our lieutenants and sergeants, do go through the training for internal affairs investigations, and we post all of our training as required by law onto our website.
All right, and I think that maybe the last one there was how Mike was related to us, and Mike is the contractor with the city as well. So yeah, so the lieutenant and Mike Janako, who's I think still with us on Zoom, they're all City of Davis folks. And then Post is state, as the chief said.
I think it's worth mentioning that the police auditor's actual title is independent police auditor. So that although he has a contract with the city, he acts independently.
Go ahead.
So quick question about the auditor. The auditor is paid by the city?
Yes.
The auditor receives training through the city to be an auditor. How do you become an auditor? So you said that they're an independent contractor. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I should say, or just to clarify, independent, of the police department, independent of the city manager. This is a position that reports directly to the city council, the independent police auditor. I was going to address something else there. I forgot what it was.
They may have a website. You could take a look. The independent auditor is, and he is an ex-federal prosecutor and has done a lot of work with police departments around the country, and is a police auditor for, well, Mike, why don't you tell her what your firm does for police departments?
Thank you, Commissioner Canning, and I'm so sad to hear that this is going to be your last meeting. Yeah, so just so everyone remembers the context of how this all came to be. There was a controversial incident that happened on Picnic Day a few years ago that created a lot of concern about policing in the city of Davis, particularly with regard to this incident. We were then asked and commissioned by the city council to do an independent review of that incident, which we did in a public-facing report. At the same time, there was a move to redesign oversight in the city of Davis, and a couple consultants were hired to do that, which is what they did. They made some recommendations with the idea of making oversight more robust. And they came up with this idea that it would be a community-based group, the Police Accountability Commission, in conjunction with an independent police auditor that would have access to confidential information, and the two would work together to provide public-facing oversight to the city of Davis. With regard to our experience and our training, Steve and I have been doing this for longer than I sometimes want to admit, but it's been over 20 years that we have been involved in this field. We both received recognition locally and nationally for our work. And we currently are the auditor, not just for the city of Davis, but for a number of other jurisdictions in the Bay Area. including the cities of Palo Alto, the county of Santa Clara, the city of Modesto, and others that I'm forgetting. So it's with that experience that we bid after the Picnic Day incident. We bid for the assignment to be the independent police auditor for the city of Davis. There was an RFP. We responded to the RFP. City Council of the city of Davis selected us to be your independent police auditor. And so that's how we end up with you all this evening. I think I've got it. Steve, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's very helpful, and that I think Commissioner Canning mentioned the website, and we certainly encourage anybody to look on the Davis website about our work, and then Mike and I are part of OIR Group, and we have our own website, oirgroup.com, that explains some of the work that we've done in a number of places, including Davis. So for people who are interested in more information about us, it is readily available. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike and Stephen. So I'll take it back to the commission. Any further questions, comments for the chief and deputy chief? All right, thanks a bunch for helping us better understand the internal affairs process and how complaints are navigated within the department. We'll move now to item 7B, which is the downtown police response. This was my request, so I can go ahead and, of course, y'all are aware, Chief and Deputy Chief, that there's been a lot of conversation in the community about public safety downtown broadly, particularly with respect to our unhoused neighbors and sometimes folks who are under or experiencing some degree of a mental health challenge or experience. And so, some of this has been presented as more sworn personnel versus more homeless outreach personnel sort of conversation. And so I just wanted to engage with y'all a little bit on what the department's recent, present sort of stance is with regard to public safety downtown, particularly with those two groups that I referenced, and how y'all anticipate if the policy answer to that question does become more sworn folks downtown, how that will work in a strategic way to address some of those concerns.
No, thank you for that. It's a good question, and absolutely, it's been a very heated conversation within our community regarding safety concerns downtown. I need to make it perfectly clear that when it comes to these issues, law enforcement is not the answer. We are part of the answer, but we're not the answer. As you know, we have an in-bed mobile clinician as part of the police department. We also have a very robust homeless outreach team, part of social services and housing department, and we work very closely with them. There are issues and concerns around homelessness, people suffering from serious mental illness, substance use disorder across the board. In a lot of those cases, law enforcement is probably not the best response to that. But the concern is really more focused on criminal conduct. And so, and that's fair, yes, we do have a role in that. And so right now, it's no secret, we've been struggling probably over the last 6 months or so with staffing issues. We're starting to right the ship and get people on board and get them trained, but we're not quite yet where we need to be. But in the meantime, to address these concerns from community members and business owners alike, we have tried to have the beat 2 officers, which were broken into 4 police beats, and the beat 2 officer is responsible for the downtown area. And so we've directed the beat 2 officer, when you're not committed to a call for service, what we call uncommitted time, you should be downtown. And make sure that you're making contact with businesses, find out what's going on, try and do high visibility. Obviously, enforcement action is necessary to do it. Make sure that you're coordinating with the clinicians, make sure that you're coordinating with the homeless outreach team, but it's limited, it's a limited response. We do also have our intelligence-led policing unit, which is primarily responsible for fentanyl-related issues and enforcement and investigation, illegal firearms, organized retail crime, but we have also asked them to redirect effort down into the downtown area, kind of doing the same tasks when available. That's not a good long-term plan. So as you're probably aware, recently we brought to council an option to bring on an additional position for a downtown beat officer. And the idea behind that is that it's consistently the same person assigned to that downtown area, would have business hours, would be able to attend business meetings, would be a recognizable face for business owners and community members, would be able to better coordinate a holistic response to issues with our mobile clinician, HHSA, social services and housing department, and the homeless outreach team, so that we really have that kind of trifecta approach of how do we address these issues and recognize what's the best resource to respond to that issue for sustainable results. And whether that's trying to connect somebody to housing, trying to connect somebody to mental health services, or in those cases where there's criminal conduct, that there is somebody there that is able to kind of rapidly respond to it. And the complaint that we've heard from businesses is, hey, we really just miss, and again, this was occurring before I got here, but we used to have a bike cop downtown apparently. And the businesses loved it. They knew that person, they interacted with that person was familiar with the issues going on downtown, and they were able to work with those businesses to kind of come up with resolutions. So right now, we just kind of have a gap in service in that space. And as you know, downtown is different. It's a unique policing environment because it is very congested. We have a lot of people down there. And obviously our goal is to ensure that our entire community feels safe in the downtown area. And police do have a role in that. Like I said earlier, we're absolutely not the entire solution, but we're part of that solution.
Thank you. Questions? Can you put, I can make some guesses. Can you put a little bit of, so I don't have to make guesses, a little bit more color on the types of crimes that folks are experiencing there that we're looking to respond to a little bit more urgently?
Sure. A lot of the crimes that we hear from the business community are individuals that will repeatedly steal from the stores, right? Steal tip jars, steal merchandise, harass employees, will stalk employees, will threaten them, will wait outside while they're trying to get to their cars at night. And it's really kind of a small number of individuals. But the goal would be to have somebody dedicated to that space that is aware of these individuals and can find different solutions to resolve that issue. Whether that is, yes, we have to make an arrest, or hey, this is probably a serious mental illness issue and we really need to kind of coordinate efforts with our clinician or other services available to us. Or it may be a matter of helping somebody get a restraining order. That's occurred very often where somebody is repeatedly harassing a business owner or employees, and for whatever reason, they're fixated on that business. And sometimes people just need to be able to connect with city resources to be able to resolve that issue. What we want to do is we want to create a position where people feel very connected and familiar with that police presence, right? They're not having to explain their situation all over again because they get the officer of the day that happens to be working that area, that happens to be working that shift, that there's some level of progress when dealing with these issues. I do feel that downtown is fairly safe. Do we have issues? Yes, of course we do. All downtowns have issues. But the goal is for us to be a good community partner and to be able to bring to bear the resources that sometimes are necessary to resolve some of these issues.
Thank you. And I think that's a good segue into my next question, because I'm wondering, I've been a participant in the last couple of years. We get up at the, butt crack of dawn to do the rainbow crosswalks around Central Park for Pride season. And there's usually, and I'm blanking on her name right now, but it's always the same officer that's helping us sort of, clear the streets and making sure that the team is safe out there. And so, in my understanding, I don't know everything about this, but in my understanding is she's not like a regular sort of, beat officer. Her specialization and sort of what she does is sort of different. And so I'm wondering, given, what you say about the very dynamic, which is of course true, very dynamic law enforcement environment that downtown Davis is, if if this is going to be a different type of officer, if it's going to be, you know, the same type of officer we have sort of, you know, patrolling the rest of the town, just that they're going to be dedicated there and going to be a sort of a familiar face, or is there going to be a different type of expectation for how they're engaging with the community?
Yeah, definitely. I think every officer in Davis has the same expectation. We pride ourselves on quality service, right? And, you know, we're a busy jurisdiction, but we also have space to be able to take the time to try and work through issues. That's the expectation for every police officer. This position is going to be unique, right? It is definitely going to be outside the norm of what you are in a patrol car taking calls for service. You're going to be on foot, you're going to be on a bike. You're going to be interacting with the businesses more often, but it will be a sworn police officer, just like any other police officer, because that's where the gap is. We have a lot of alternate service delivery models in the city, which are amazing and do amazing work and are able to resolve a lot of issues. But there are some issues that they can't. And if somebody is doing criminal conduct or being violent, somebody has to actually intervene that has the capability and legal authority to do so. So that's kind of the goal with this. It's one officer position. It's not like we're trying to create an entire team, which most jurisdictions have a downtown team. This is one officer because we believe it's part of a bigger holistic approach to public safety. And law enforcement has a big role in that, but we're not the only role in that.
Thank you. Other questions?
I just have a question about the individuals that you do see downtown that are just sitting there all day. Back in the old days, weren't there Lord? Yeah, that word, thank you. Is that law no longer around?
No, those have been found to be fairly unconstitutional, you know, there are jurisdictions, and you know, obviously with the Grants Pass case being overturned, there are some jurisdictions that are pushing the boundaries on no sit stand ordinances at the city level, we'll see how the courts review that as far as enforceability. I don't feel that that is probably the appropriate use of law enforcement services, and I don't know if that's going to really get us where we want to be as a community. You know, there are jurisdictions that are looking at it, that's for sure.
And just to be clear, just from what I've been hearing and what it seems like you're describing, it doesn't seem like that's what businesses are asking for, right? It's a response to some of these more violent or threatening things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is really the concern is when it comes down to safety. And obviously we do have a role in that. And, you know, regardless of circumstances, you know, safety is paramount to us. So.
Yeah, and I think that's where, if there is concern about this, this way of tackling, you know, the concerns that folks have downtown, particularly business owners and just people operating in the downtown of their own community, I think there's a concern that this new officer would be sort of targeting something like that, which I think is many sort of residents in the community would balk at, but I also think, you know, many business leaders who are looking for a different type of response from the department would also not be supportive of, you know, sort of a person who's just sitting on the side of the concrete bothering nobody, being targeted by police. Other questions?
I was just gonna say, I'm not speaking for the ACLU, but I can see the ACLU having an issue with that because at what point are, you know, officers gonna be allowed to do their work and instead of just, you know, citing somebody for just sitting. Again, and you can't do that. You can't cite somebody for sitting or for just maybe being poor or, you know, whatever. I think I mentioned in the past, I was seeing some activities downtown that were unfortunate that happened, you know, where somebody was wronged. And I think the officers that handled it very well, given the situation. They had to chase after a person, an unhoused person, I believe they were, and who took a cell phone that stole from somebody who had limited mobility use. And they handled the situation really well. It was happening like right before me, it was all unfolding. And another situation too, where there's a person that clearly needed some mental health help. And I saw that they had somebody there with them. They must have called someone, I don't know, but they came out and work with the officers and help them. And so I was very happy with that, and hope these situations don't happen at all. When they do happen, I hope they happen in this manner, you know, and they're very respectful and helpful to the citizens. Thank you.
Go ahead.
What are the hours of your embedded clinician?
So they usually work like an 8 to 5. We can flex those kind of depending on the load, but they're not an employee of the city, they're an employee of HHSA. So there are some MOU restrictions based on the number or, you know, kind of their working hours, but we usually strike a reasonable understanding of, you know, what is best for us. And then, as you know, and now required, the county also has, you know, access for mobile clinicians, usually through telehealth after hours. And we get a lot of calls into our dispatch center that we end up sending to 988 or the crisis access line, who will connect them to a clinician to get them the best resources. And as you're probably aware, there are some jurisdictions that have decided based on the Scott v. Smith case out of Las Vegas that they're not going to respond to mental health calls at all because of the liability to the officers. I do not think that is the correct approach. If people are in crisis and they need help, then we need to provide that help. Do I think a police officer is the best resource in most of those situations? Probably not. But we don't have an infrastructure in place that's robust enough to be able to address all those issues. But we still need to be able to provide some level of service. And I know that, you know, Mike and Steve did an audit of the Davis Police Department and our response to mental health. And I wasn't working here at the time, but I reviewed it and it was really good. And I see our officers interact all the time. And I think they do amazing work, especially for, you know, how difficult some of these situations can be.
What's the case from Nevada that you
Scott v. Smith.
Scott v. Smith, thank you.
You know, I will say that in the, 6+ years that I've been a member of the Police Accountability Commission, whenever I'm, you know, out and about and I'm not in a rush and I see, you know, a police pull over, you know, I always stop just to sort of, you know, hey, make sure, you know, everything's cool here. And, you know, I really don't have complaints in what I've observed. And so, you know, that does sort of speak to, of course, I've heard, you know, sort of secondhand a bunch of things from people that have been less positive, but, you know, in the sort of almost countless police stops that I've observed over the course of 6 years in Davis, it does seem like, you know, this is an institution that from the top is being led with a culture that prides, you know, this you know, more supportive resolution that Stephen, you know, referenced at the beginning of our meeting. And so, you know, I think that to the extent, as I mentioned before, that a more visible police presence is about being more responsive to threatening and violent situations and not sort of targeting sort of, you know, otherwise law-abiding members of our community. I think, you know, that's something that a lot of folks have support for. I think there's just some concern and confusion and questions about sort of what the goals are. And like I said, there's this is something that's tied to a larger strategy, not just let's throw a cop at it, you know, which is sometimes the way that we've addressed things in the past. It's not effective. Other questions, comments? I'll go to public comment on this item. If not, I'll go ahead.
I'm curious as to why there's only one police officer that will be assigned to the downtown area. Because I think that it's a matter of safety for the police officer as well, because depending on the individual, you don't know if they are under the influence of anything, but if they are, some people can be as strong as Superman. There was an incident about a week ago in Los Angeles where there was a car chase and the man hit 13 cars before they finally caught up with him. And when he got out of the car, it took 6 police officers just to subdue him. You know, so and one of them, I think he went into mild cardiac distress on the police officer. So I think that, and there should be a team of officers. They don't have to necessarily walk the beat together, but they could be coordinated in downtown. I just don't think one is sufficient because one, you have a lot of students here, about 30,000. And two, you have the regular residents that are here. So we're talking about, depending on what's going on, a large group of people, and I just don't think one officer would be sufficient.
Thank you. Chief, can you speak a little bit more to the long-term vision for this? Is it, we're gonna do this for a year and come back and see if maybe we need more people? Or is it, we're gonna do this, for a certain amount of time and we, at a certain point, anticipate sort of upping it? Can you just sort of share sort of what the thought is there?
Sure, no, and I appreciate the comments. Obviously, we, at any given time, there are other police officers in the city. And we train to address these situations so we don't get into situations where the officer is going to be injured, or we try to the best of our ability to mitigate that. But the tentative plan is that this will be the downtown beat officer, and this officer will be assigned there. We have some pretty substantial apartment complexes that are in the planning phases to be developed downtown. So the population downtown is only going to increase, and it's very condensed. And, talking to residents and business owners, they really missed not having that bike cop downtown and what that officer brought as far as value to the community. So I would like to hopefully see this going. If we get to an area where it's not needed, so be it. Then I guess we were successful and that's a win. But I think for at least the foreseeable future, the goal is to have an officer down there that's a neighborhood police officer that is not just driving around in a car, that is accessible, that is connected with people, and is, hopefully able to resolve some of these issues.
How long would it take? You've got four cops in cars, right, at any one time. So if you have an officer downtown and he calls for assistance, what's the typical response time?
I mean, we're about 10 square miles. So honestly, for the most part, it's within a couple of minutes, an officer can get there pretty quick. And then you got to remember during, daytime hours too, we also have usually 2 motor units, which can get places really quick. So, we do have resources. Obviously, we're not as big, as our police department as West Sacramento or Woodland, but, we're able to address most issues pretty quickly.
And then can you speak a little bit more to, just so we have an understanding to the degree, to which this person is going to be alone. You mentioned sort of how they're going to be working with sort of existing partners like, social services and housing and some of our other, I think as you described them, alternative sort of service providers in the community. Can you describe a little bit more about how they're going to be sort of working in that sort of like quasi interagency team?
Yeah, for sure. I think, when we as a community are effective is when we collaborate. And that is really no different for the police department, which is part of this community. And so when we look at problems that are chronic or ongoing or really require some extra care or thoughtfulness in how to resolve it, it's a coordination of effort. And so the way we envision this, right, is that there's frequent communication, which we already have, but it will be consistently with the same person. And that we're trying to look at problems holistically, right? If we come in this and look at like every problem's a nail or a hammer, we're going to get it wrong most of the time, right? An arrest is not usually the best outcome. And I would say most times it's the worst outcome. And so really, we're trying to figure out how do we solve these problems collectively as a community team. So it is really going to be identifying like, hey, we've got this issue. What are the underlying issues? How do we work to resolve those and to come up with some, sustainable results? Thank you.
I'm sorry? I was gonna get there. No one said anything. Let's see. We did do, okay, so nothing else that you want to ask for? Okay, thanks. We're gonna be hearing a lot from you this evening. So we'll move to our item 7C, which is the data sharing program that I know we want to hear a little bit more information about. Take it away.
Sure. This is actually a project that's been in the works for about 2 months for us. It's through Justice Counts, which is through Department of Justice. And essentially, it's a program to be able to funnel our data into a forward-facing dashboard in the federal government funds it. The district attorney's office, as you're aware, has a lot of their data on their website, which was pretty costly. This program was introduced to us, and there's some other agencies, I think, in our area that are also looking at it. There's some other options as far as how to do this. But essentially, my vision is that it's not our data, it's the community's data, and it should be forward-facing. And I think it's useful in a lot of ways because people are curious. They want to know often, hey, how busy is it? Is crime going up? Is crime going down? What's the workload? What does staffing look like? These are questions that we quite often get at community events, and last year we did 16 different community events, and I don't think there was a single one I showed up to where somebody didn't ask those questions. So, my internal question to my team was, how do we get this information so people can just self-serve and find it? And, we have a pretty good interactive map right now for tracking crimes and reported incidents, but we want to make it more robust. So we're in the process of trying to figure out how we do that, because obviously not every system talks to every system as efficiently as we'd like, but we're definitely on a path to get there, because what I'd like to do is have this kind of slow rollout of this data so that people can go to our website and see for themselves, what's occurring in my city and what does it look like? Where is it trending?
Thank you, Commissioner Bliss.
So what the DA uses is the Measures for Justice Commons program. And that's what my understanding is West Sacramento is one of the pilots of 2 police departments in the country. Is this the one you're also looking for? Because you said something about the Department of Justice, so I didn't know.
Yeah, Justice Counts is the program that's funded by the Department of Justice, but I believe they're similar because I know the district attorney's office was also transitioning to Justice Counts.
Because they're still doing the Commons program.
They may have 2 paralleling programs because they started before Justice Counts came online,
right.
and they paid a substantial amount to get their data forward facing. But I believe they're trying to migrate to Justice Counts. Don't hold me to that because I don't know for sure. But
the name of it because I know that I'm real familiar with the Measures for Justice program and what they're doing and how they're setting up the program and their critical items they're looking at. And I'm hoping that this is somewhat similar and would be so easy that any consumer can pull up the data easily, which they can from Commons.
Yeah, it would be very, very similar, I would believe. The goal of Justice Counts is that all agencies are operating on essentially kind of the same platform. Now, how agencies define data can vary a little bit. So the devil's in the details. There's never going to be an apples to apples, but you can theoretically jump from jurisdiction to jurisdiction with kind of an understanding of statistics related to that very specific department.
Other questions? Just to clarify, in these times that we're in, when people say Department of Justice, I'm like, which one are we talking about? So California or federal?
Federal.
Okay, thank you. And then, well, that's worrisome.
The funding may end at any time, so
Right, yeah.
we may get back to square one.
Party while you can. You mentioned costs, or you mentioned that with regard to the Commons program that Commissioner Bliss references with the DA's office, that they spent a substantial, you said it twice, they spent a good amount of money getting their information on there. Should I take it that this, what is it, Justice Counts platform is more cost effective, or are you just sort of just referencing that in general, that the DA's office spent a good chunk of money?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to speak directly. I just know that their program was expensive, the initial program that they launched. This program is free.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at.
A huge selling point for us,
Yes.
because we were like, oh, well, how do we sign up?
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to understand if we were referencing that because this one was more cost effective and free is my favorite cost effective measure, or if we were ragging on the DA, which, as folks know, I love any opportunity to do so. Other questions?
I guess my concern is who sets up the metrics and the data collected if you're going through a DOJ versus measures that justice uses a community-based group of law enforcement to determine what's the information that's important to the community. And a freebie from DOJ sounds like it's a top down rather than a semi bottom up. And the price is right, I get that. But it's a shame. That's why I was so interested in how West Sac is working.
Yeah, and I'd have to get with West Sac. Measures counts sounds very close to justice counts. So I'm curious if these two are somehow combined. But I can tell you this, the DOJ doesn't care what data you're presenting. DOJ just wants the data to be public facing. That's their goal. So we have discretion on what information we provide. Obviously, we already provide a substantial amount of information, like our budget is posted online, our complaints are posted online, our use of forces are posted online. So for us, it's really defining crime rates. Now, anybody can go to the California Department of Justice and pull up your city, and you can do a 3-year side-by-side comparison, and they'll tell you what percentage crime rates have gone up or down based on the cyber's data. But what we are also looking to do is present information related to response times and to staffing levels and workload, because crimes don't relate to workload. Workload is completely different, and that needs to be quantified differently. But we want that information to be provided to the community so that they understand, hey, when we're talking about the committed or uncommitted time of an officer, what does that mean? If somebody works a 10-hour shift, but 9.3 hours out of their shift are on calls for service, they don't have any capacity to do anything else. That means that they're not enforcing traffic laws, they're not showing up at community events, they're not being able to do the things that the community wants. And so I think it's important for us to be able to demonstrate that data so that people kind of have an understanding of what is their police department doing and how busy is their police department based on staffing.
Yeah, I think we were also interested in this because one of the things that this program looks at is officer wellness and the stressors and things like that. So it's a very robust type of a thing that shows a huge amount of things beyond the crime rate and some of the other things. So anyway, we'll have to take this further time because, like I said, I think it's forward-facing is wonderful, but I'd sure like to see a combo of community-based build-up.
Other questions, comments?
Well, you're already on the Justice Council website.
Yeah.
You're on their map, along with Winters and the DA. West Sac isn't, by the way.
No, because they're.
Yeah, it must be a completely different program.
Is it?
Yeah, their tax measure brought in a lot more revenue, so.
Other questions, comments? I'll open up to a public comment for this item. Any public comment? Okay, moving back to the commission. Any final thoughts here? Always good to have more information. We'll take it from there. Okay, moving to 7D, which is our sort of second reading, for lack of a better term, of the surveillance technology review. Wait, I'm sorry, is this,
Yeah, this is the second.
Dylan?
Yeah.
yes?
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I'm just not sure the process of your commission. Do you guys make a motion to extend your meeting?
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah,
Okay.
when you interrupted, I was like, ooh, is it past 8:30? Okay, thank you. Let's see, we have one more regular item. What do folks think, 8:50? I move to extend the meeting until 8:50. Is there a second?
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. Okay, so moving to this, which is our second reading of the surveillance technology items. Do folks have, I remember we were looking to sort of drill down and see if we needed more information. I had more comments from our initial discussion at the last meeting. Do people have things that have come to their mind since our initial discussion? I'll open up for public comment otherwise. All right, back to the commission, one last chance. All right, so we'll go ahead. I'm sorry, I'll go ahead.
Are we on D,
Yes, we're on 7D,
and public comment?
Yes,
I'm curious as to, does Davis participate, in flock surveillance? I think it's FLOC. And it's a unique type of, surveillance with cameras that captures things, because the cameras are completely different from when I first came here, and how they're positioned and where they are. But, next meeting I'm coming to, I'll tell you what that acronym means. But they deal with surveillance for law enforcement.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, I didn't think any of us had an answer up here. So okay, yeah, I'm sorry, one more time, anything further from the commission? Okay, let's move to 8A. So just briefly, this subcommittee, myself, Commissioner Sherman and Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald did meet, I believe that was Monday of last week, so just 7 days ago. We decided, Mike, boo, we're gonna get rid of you now. We did have a great discussion about really, I'll say the thanks, Chief and Deputy Chief. Mostly how, of course, we very much value you and Stephen's work with the commission over the years. Really, and perhaps, I'll sort of forward these in a more detailed way to both Barbara and Carrie, but we just had some informational questions with regard to the timeline of the contract, of Mike's contract, and also some questions, some budgetary questions with regard to how the position is funded. Really nothing with regard to dissatisfaction with Mike or Stephen's work, but really just because, the three of us, myself, Commissioner Sherman and Escamilla Greenwald, we really did value it. I think we speak for the entire commission and really valuing their work, wanted to be sure that was secured through the long haul. There was a question, in public comment about how sort of federal changes in DEI policies might be affecting, the city of Davis or the Davis Police Department. And, we just want to make sure that those things that we have done and have, expended a lot of blood, sweat, and tears over the past couple of years building in terms of police accountability in this community aren't eroded because, we're sort of being strong armed by federal authority. So I'll be sure to forward those detailed questions to both Barbara and Carrie. And we'll see if we can get a little bit more information as to how that lays out. I will say with Mike and Stephen here that I'll reach out to both of you for a time for the three of us, I'm sorry, I guess the five of us, you, Stephen, and myself, Commissioner Sherman and Escamilla Greenwald to meet, just to have a follow-up conversation from our one last week. But that is all from us, unless there's anything to add here or questions.
Yeah, no, just to, Chair, just to add what you're saying, we're very proud to have you both working with us and the work that we've done and how you worked with us over the years. And like Chairman Horton mentioned, we just want to make sure that what's going on nationally isn't going to negatively impact your positions or funding for your position. So we just wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
Anything else, commissioners? Public comment on this item? Back to commission, anything last here? All right, yeah, look out for that email. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Don't take this the wrong way. If you are having a private meeting, is that a violation of the opens meeting if you guys meet together? Okay.
Perfectly appropriate question. No, we don't take it harshly in any way. So the Brown Act prevents us having a meeting with a majority of members of this body. So we can't have a meeting with 4 of us. So that's why all subcommittees on this commission are 3 or less. Yes. Anything final from the commission? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to summarize, share with the my colleagues, in the context of the conversation we had with the chief and the deputy chief tonight, the very last topic that we got into, which was the data sharing program, was a good lead into this. We depend upon Mike and Steve to be the eyes and ears of this commission to a considerable extent. Sometimes, from time to time, all of us have picked up information through our own reading and study and shared it with the others, but we don't have anything approaching the resources that the auditor provides for us. And we're in an era now where data has become very precious and very tenuous in terms of its availability. I don't know how many of you have read similar stories to what I have, but I see a lot of journalism attesting to the actual disappearance of data in the situation that we have in Washington now. So people have been reporting frequently, and media have been investigating, and they have confirmed that entire websites having to do with data on subjects that are disfavored by the administration literally disappeared. I know it sounds like science fiction, it sounds like George Orwell, and it is like that, but this is not fiction, this is fact, this is really happening. So at the same time, we are subject to great difficulty in keeping up with facts and information that is vital to our work. We are facing critical financial challenges with the distribution of federal funds into local government needs being becoming more difficult all the time, more tenuous, and less to be relied upon. So all of this is happening at once, creating a data emergency, in effect. So at this time, I think it's vital that the city of Davis commit itself to continuing the relationship with our police auditors and know that we as a commission are united in our enthusiasm for continuing it and in our conviction that they are providing us with information constantly in our meetings and between meetings, in emails that I have enjoyed with the auditors. I've had questions come up or asked for data or asking for their opinion on one thing or another that I have found to investigate. So the timing is critical at this point. I think there's an urgency here. We don't know, and maybe the city can provide us with, the city manager's office can provide us with more specifics as to when the contract is due for renewal, what the actual logistics of this are. But I do think that we want to go on record as a commission to make it clear to the city council that we feel this is a vital service that we need in our work.
Thank you.
I'll make it clear to the city council, I meant to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Sherman. I think the theme, Stephen and Mike, is that, again, we really appreciate y'all's service and work with us over the past seemingly thousands of years, but I'm told it's only about 6 years that we've been doing this. And so, yeah, we're gonna work on making sure that we have the best possible understanding, as you know, myself, Commissioner Sherman, and Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald have sort of alluded to it. So, like I said before, you know, Gary and Barbara, I'll be sure to make sure I forward those questions that Commissioner Sherman just referenced, so we can get a better understanding of that and see if we need to maybe make a recommendation of policy change if that might be necessary. So let's see. So we'll I'll send those questions to Barbara and Carrie. I will reach out to, as I mentioned before, Mike and Stephen to schedule a meeting between the two of them in the subcommittee, and then we'll just go forward from there. Let's see, taking us to long range, I guess it's really just sort of a question that follows from the last item. Carrie or Barbara, do you know if there's a timeline to the, because my understanding is that we sort of do our review in terms of the IPA position, and then we forward that off to the city council, and the city council sort of, hey, it's all good, but is there a timeline to that? That's kind of what my question is. Do they like always do that in May or?
Dylan, I can't recall, since it's been a few years
Yes.
since I sat in with all you guys,
Yes.
so it's good to see you again. My recollection is that it wouldn't necessarily be on a certain time each year, but would have more to do with the timing of when you actually submit
Okay.
your thing. But we can certainly check in with Kelly to see if she can provide us with a different answer.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we weren't running up against a timeline. It seems like we're always a little bit late in our IPA review, so I just wanted to make sure we weren't in danger of that this time.
Why don't we go ahead and check in with Kelly on
Okay.
that, just to see if there's a timeline that we're not aware of.
Okay, cool. Well, regardless, I anticipate us reporting back at the next meeting. Any other suggestions for next agenda item or next meeting agenda items? Public comment on this item? Back to the commission. Carrie, did you have something?
No, I think I'm just reminding you already took public comment on the subcommittee. Is that the one you're talking about?
No, we're
Oh,
on
we're
the
keeping
long
it
range.
long range.
Yes, yes.
Oh, gosh, okay, Kelly just wanted me to let you know that, this upcoming July, you will have no meeting because it will be a recess. I think sometimes you often recess in August,
Yes.
but for this particular, recess, it will be in July to coincide with council's recess.
Has council's recess permanently moved to July? I feel like I recall hearing that, but I'm not sure if
I don't know if it's permanent or if it was
just
a
is this
decision
year.
for this year anyway. Yes, the recess is in July, so you guys will have your recess in July as well.
Plan your Cancun vacations in July, folks. With that being said, we'll go ahead and move to adjourn at 8:46. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed and extensions, meeting adjourned. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
FYI, flock, I think is the name of the camera. It doesn't stand for anything.
Oh, all right. The more you know. Okay.
You're not taking to adjourn?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
That's what I thought.
You're not taking her tomorrow, also?
Right. Well, no, I'm gonna be joining Ted Cruz in Cancun, so, you know, it'll be a whole big party.